Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to explore how the golden age of global finance came crashing down in the summer of 1914. It's an incredible story about the hidden machinery that ran the world economy, the, well, deeply flawed men who controlled it, and the sheer speed with which a seemingly invincible system completely collapsed. To set the mood, just think about this reflection from the renowned economist John Maynard Keynes. It perfectly captures the nostalgia and, frankly, the impending doom of an era that was about to vanish practically overnight. It really sets the stage for a period where economic progress felt limitless, right up until the exact moment it didn't. The source material for our deep dive today is Liaquat Ahmed's brilliant historical analysis of this fragile banking system. We're going to look really closely at the central bankers who wielded unimaginable power during this crisis. And we'll see how their strict, almost rigid adherence to an economic ideology set the stage for total global chaos.
Section 1. The Golden Age of Finance, La Belle Époque.
Before the summer of 1914, the world was more interconnected than ever before. There had been decades of peace among the major powers, which meant European capital was just flowing freely across the entire globe. We're talking about wealth financing rubber plantations in Malaya, cattle ranches in Argentina, and massive, ambitious engineering feats like the Suez and Panama Canals. And at the absolute center of this booming, interconnected web of international credit, that was the City of London.
Section 2. How the gold standard worked, the machinery of wealth.
So to understand this machinery, we have to look at the central bank. And get this, it's pretty wild to think about, but in 1914, these institutions dictating national credit were actually privately owned. They occupied this weird hybrid zone. They were accountable to banker directors and shareholders, yet they were granted a complete monopoly over printing money. But their main goal? It wasn't full employment or anything like that. It was strictly, absolutely about preserving the value of the national currency above all else. Our source actually describes this system as a giant monetary thermostat. It automatically regulated the economy based purely on the physical flow of gold. So when gold piled up in the vault, the bank lowered interest rates. That made credit cheaper, encouraging businesses to borrow and pumping money into the booming system. And when gold was scarce, well, they simply turned the dial the other way, raising rates to contract the money supply.
Because every major currency was tied by law to a specific physical weight of gold, they were all rigidly fixed to one another. The British pound was legally defined as 113 grains of pure gold, and the US dollar was exactly 23.22 grains. This mechanical linkage meant a government couldn't just magically print extra cash when it was strapped. That basically eliminated inflation and created massive international trust.
But here is the absolutely crucial point, the sheer fragility of this whole setup. It was all built on a shockingly narrow base. To put it into perspective, the volume of all the gold ever mined in the history of the world up to 1914 could barely fill a modest two-story townhouse. No joke. The entire booming global economy was resting on this tiny amount of physical metal hidden away in deep, subterranean vaults. Section 3. The Great Illusion of Peace. Why war seemed impossible. So this immense wealth instability, it created some really dangerous hubris. People developed this firm belief that the very interconnectedness of their money and trade made war completely impossible. This idea spread like wildfire thanks to Norman Angel's 1910 blockbuster pamphlet, The Great Illusion. He argued that commercial disaster and disrupting international credit would ruin both the winner and the loser. Kings, foreign secretaries, top military strategists, they all fully believed mutual financial ruin would deter any rational nation from ever firing a shot.
Section 4. The central bankers, the humans behind the machinery.
But who was actually running this supposedly infallible machine? Well, in Germany, you have Hjalmar Schacht, a rising banking star. Picture a precise, brilliant guy who carried the rigid, stiff appearance of a Prussian military officer, right down to the brush-cut hair and starched white colors, even though he wasn't military at all. He was fiercely ambitious and thought the idea of international rivalries threatening the German economic miracle was just profoundly irrational. Now, contrast Schacht with Britain's Montagu Norman, a director at the Bank of England. Norman was a deeply neurotic and eccentric man. He suffered from severe nervous breakdowns, manic depression, and, get this, he was even incorrectly misdiagnosed with a fatal illness by the famous psychiatrist Dr. Carl Jung. You really can't make this up. Norman hid from reporters, dressed in flowing capes and emerald tie pens, designed his house like a millionaire's monastery, and dabbled in spiritualism. These were the actual guys at the controls when the unthinkable happened.
Section 5. The Unexpected Storm, July 1914. And now we hit the sudden shock that shatters the great illusion. The dominoes fell with terrifying speed. After the Archduke's assassination in late June, most European leaders and bankers just went away on their summer golfing and yachting holidays. They were completely unbothered. The public was complacent. But then, in the final week of July, ultimatums were issued, general mobilizations were ordered, and within days, the entire continent stumbled blindly toward full-scale conflict.
Section 6. The system collapses. The financial house of cards falls.
That political crisis instantly triggered a financial panic. The whole theory that economic ties would prevent war turned completely upside down. Those very ties were snapping under the pressure, dragging the financial world down with them. As stock exchanges, the bourses, shuttered their doors across Berlin, Vienna, Brussels, and St. Petersburg, all the panic liquidations violently concentrated on London. With exchanges closed, foreigners couldn't send money abroad to settle their trade debts. The great merchant banks in London suddenly faced immediate catastrophic bankruptcy. The entire global credit system literally froze overnight.
The panic among the financial elite was absolute. Walter Cunliffe, the governor of the Bank of England, a guy definitely not known for theatrical displays, reportedly went to the Chancellor of the Exchequer to plead, with tears in his eyes, to keep Britain out of the conflict. He was absolutely terrified that they would all be utterly ruined.
What followed was a classic, terrifying run on the bank. Terrified commercial bankers started desperately hoarding gold sovereigns. Within just days, the Bank of England's gold reserves plummeted from over $130 million down to under $50 million. To stop the bleeding, the bank took the drastic step of cranking interest rates up to an unprecedented 10%, and the Treasury had to step in and extend the August bank holiday just to buy some time.
But what's truly fascinating here is the staggering disconnect of that weekend. Inside the bank boardrooms, apocalyptic terror. Bankers were literally shaking their fists in frantic meetings, staring into the abyss of total insolvency. Meanwhile, outside, the public was completely calm. The English crowds were queuing patiently at the bank, cheerfully singing patriotic songs in Trafalgar Square. They were completely oblivious to the fact that the financial system was collapsing right beneath their feet.
In a matter of days, the pristine, globalized financial system of 1914 was utterly broken. The grand illusion of a peaceful, interconnected world governed by the rational flow of capital was dead, replaced by the grim reality of the First World War.
So, that leaves us with a fascinating, provocative question to take away from this explainer. Now that this elegant machinery lies in ruins, as the smoke eventually clears, how could this devastated financial web possibly be woven back together? And honestly, can the world really trust the exact same eccentric, deeply flawed men who just watched it collapse to rebuild the global economy? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. I hope it changes how you look at the very foundations of our financial world.